Welcome to our Yurtiful Life podcast. In today's episode, we will be discussing homeschooling.
Hey there, Yurties.
Thanks for joining us today. For anyone new here, I'm Keegan.
And I'm Sarah. We've been living a minimal off-grid lifestyle for over 10 years now.
We have a large family and lots of experiences to share.
So let's get to it. Welcome to
Our Yurtiful Life.
So today we're going to be talking about homeschooling. And this is a topic that we've been asked a lot about. Why we homeschool, how do we homeschool, etc. So today we thought we would delve into this vast subject.
Yes, so first of all, why homeschooling? Well, it really starts for us a scriptural basis. For me as a father, I'm held responsible for what my children learn and are taught. And so in my mind, the most efficient way to make sure they're taught the correct thing is to be teaching them yourself.
And we have seen benefits to homeschooling, both in our own lives, in the lives of others we have observed, as well as in the lives of our own children. We've seen so many benefits for homeschooling. Homeschooling allows us to customize what each child needs, and that is one of the benefits, is when a child has learning struggles or excels in certain areas, we are able to really customize homeschooling to tailor that child's needs.
So that allows us to make the education more child-centered, according to how the child learns. That's how we approach it. Not all homeschoolers do that, but that's worked well for us. So that's great. That's why we homeschool. But is homeschooling legal?
And you really need to know what your state requires to legally homeschool. Our state requires that we have a portfolio reviewed every year, a portfolio of the child's work, examples of what they've done, things that we have done, keeping a schedule, or the option of standardized testing every year. Also, our state requires yearly letters to be sent in and evaluation by a state licensed teacher every year if you're doing a portfolio review, or if you're doing standardized testing, you need to send in the results of that with your yearly update letter.
And to help with understanding your state's legal requirements, we highly recommend the HSLDA. That's HSLDA. They are an organization that is proficient in the law of for every state what homeschooling laws are on the books. They also lobby to try to make the laws more friendly for homeschooling or protect the rights that are already established. So very much a good organization to be a part of, a lot of knowledge you can glean, and they have a protective membership.
So legality will vary from state to state, but the biggest thing is you need to do your research. HSLDA is a great resource for that. Know your state requirements, and we do highly suggest you stick by them and obey state laws in order to keep you and your children safe. Now let's get a little bit into our homeschooling journey and how we came to homeschool. I'll let Keegan start with his schooling story and then where I came from.
So for me, homeschooling didn't start until third grade. I was private Christian school from kindergarten until third grade. After third grade, on the recommendation of my teachers to my parents, they decided to start homeschooling me. For my version of homeschooling was very book heavy. We used a Becca book, which is the same curriculum the private school I was going to had been using. So it was the same curriculum, just at home. I did a lot of self-reading, self-education, and some hands-on with my mom at that time. And once I hit high school, I did a Becca's DVD curriculum for all 4 years of high school.
So Keegan was schooled in what I would consider to be school at home. He experienced a lot of bullying and delays in grade school when he was being private schooled in a private Christian school. He couldn't keep up, so they said, you need to take him out and homeschool him. But here's the curriculum that we use, which happens to be a Becca. And so he was brought home and had a little bit more one-on-one with his mom for the first year or so. But then, even then, it was school at home, sitting at the school.
Which did help me.
Or sitting at the table doing school.
Right. It did help me because I was an only child, so I had no siblings. It was a very quiet house. I was able to focus more. I had no bullying happening from schoolmates. So it did help me scholastically because I was able to focus and do things a little bit more at my own pace.
So again, I would say it was a form of homeschooling, but to me, it's more school at home. It was very rigid and structured in a very strict setting because Abeka is a very strict
It
curriculum.
was a very scholastically based program.
And that would be a huge stark contrast to my background. I had a lot of homeschooling freedom. Now, my mom is a teacher and social worker. She has a degree in childhood education, and she was a huge believer in life school. And that being said, we still did Abeka for the first few years. She really believed Abeka had one of the best phonics programs out of all of the school products that were available at that time. So she heavily relied on Abeka for the first few, like kindergarten, maybe into going into first grade. But then she believed in using a variety of curriculums to help you and to meet each of us where our needs were at and tailor each program to fit our specific learning styles. Even though she had 3 of us at the time, we were all homeschooled very specifically according to things that we liked. If we had interests, we did a lot of interest-based learning, a lot of unit studies and things of that nature. And we did standardized testing every year as part of our proof that we were actually succeeding in homeschool. But we did have a very customized homeschool experience, a lot of life schooling, and a lot of field trips and hands-on, and some days where we didn't do bookwork and it was just life school. So that was my personal experience with homeschooling. As we started out, there were 3 of us that she was homeschooling. Throughout the years, she helped homeschool a number of children that would either come into the home partial days. There was a single mom she helped, and we homeschooled her 3 boys 3 days a week, and the mom would homeschool them the other 2 days she had off. Then we had times where there was a local Christian school that she would help teach and tutor kids there. So we were always having a flux and change in our life. And then as we got even older and we started fostering and adopting, that brought even more of a ebb and flow to how our curriculum looked and changed. So I would say that was my homeschooling journey in a nutshell. And what was the outcome of our homeschooling and what are the benefits of it?
Well, the outcome was that we both have college degrees. Both of us went to college in different coursework, and we both graduated from college. And we both also later went on to get workplace experience and held functional jobs as a functional part of society.
So homeschooling has its benefits, and we can have a very strict schooling at home experience and have successful outcomes from that. And you can have a more free schooling, homeschooling experience where there's maybe a little bit more freedom, but still we were meeting our course and doing our things. And now, yeah, I hold college degrees. I was working by the time I was 16. From there, you could only go up.
Yep, so homeschooling does work. However, when Sarah and I first got married, I didn't want to homeschool our children.
Yes, I remember that conversation so vividly. And I had said, oh, and I just assuming here, but we're going to homeschool. And he's like, no, I don't want to homeschool. And that just shows the perspective of homeschooling. While we both at that point in time had college degrees and were working and being functioning members of society, Keegan's perception of homeschool was a very, very negative one. Whereas
Yes.
my perception of homeschool was extremely positive.
My version of homeschooling was very stressful and very book heavy. It was pretty much the classroom in the house. There wasn't a huge difference there, aside maybe a little lax in some areas, but bookwork wise, scholastically wise, you're doing the same thing, and no matter how long it takes, too. And since I'm a slower book learner and book worker, it would always take me longer than 8-hour days. So my days ended up being very long, especially getting into high school and all those kind of things. So to me, that was homeschooling. I didn't want homeschooling to consume the child's life. I wanted them to learn, but I also wanted them to be able to function. So in my mind, they needed to go to some kind of school outside the home.
And whereas for me, we still had a very much classroom setting. I remember vividly having posters on the wall and a bulletin board and all of the normal classroom things in our schoolroom area. And then later, as we transitioned to, we had moved and we had our dining room, we had posters on the wall, posters on the table underneath the plastic that we could use on top of and see the posters. And I just remember very much it was a classroom setting. Like we all did our school around the table. And we'll talk more about curriculum later on, and I'll share some of the many curriculums that I used. It's not that I wasn't doing book work, because we were, and we would spend a couple hours every day doing book work. But we had the freedom and the relaxation around it that if you are struggling, you could take a little more time, or maybe you just were really burnt out and you couldn't continue on in this. And instead of, nope, you have to get it done because it says you have to do it, there was more grace, I would say, built into the homeschooling. Grace with ourselves, grace with the teacher. Like, hey, let's set it aside. Let's do other stuff, and maybe another time address that a different way. Maybe something else will help that concept click. And so, again, I had an extremely positive, and I, again, challenged him. I'm like, let me try. Let me show you how I was homeschooled, and let's see if that makes a difference.
I think, from my perspective, the biggest difference between how Sarah was taught homeschooling and how I was taught was Sarah was taught to enjoy the schooling process, to embrace it, and to love learning. Where I was taught that's a form of work that you do and you accomplish to get to the next thing. That you learn how to get through it and you learn to do it well enough that you can then use it to get into jobs or other things, that school is just a stepping stone. So, a different perspective, I was not taught to love the process because the process was seen as temporary and just something you have to do anyway.
And I was taught you learn your whole life, so you might as well learn to enjoy it from an early age.
Yep, so two different perspectives.
So at what age do we start school? Well, we would say we start at birth.
That's our favorite answer.
That is our favorite. It gets a big reaction.
Some nice looks. Yeah.
Yes, but really, we start training our children from the moment, even before they're born. As soon as they are conceived, we're training our children.
Yeah, Sarah starts to pull out the flashcard and say, come on, child,
No.
A, B, C.
When the baby's in utero, we're reading, we're talking to baby, we're talking to the children around. So baby is going to, from the moment they're born into the family, they're going to be hearing stories read. They're going to be immersed into a world of learning. And so we do believe learning starts at birth and before. But as far as formal schooling,
the real answer is once they start showing interest, which for us is a young age.
Because we view the world as a place that we will always be learning, we encourage our children, even from a very, very young age, to start. And that means it's usually by 1, 2, they're already wanting to do school. They're wanting to participate in learning to read or to write. And obviously, they're not going to have the skills, or we've had earlier readers, later readers, but we meet them where they're at and we encourage them in the level that they are. And that's okay. We don't rush our children. All of them, as when we have done testing, show above average IQ with that. So we really aren't concerned with where our children are at. We've had earlier readers, later readers. It's okay. We just take each child as an individual and encourage them. We have one child who started reading very early in their 4th year, and it clicked for them. And then we've had another who took till after they were about 6.5 before they started reading, and even now is not the strongest reader, but that's okay. We have some that love reading and others that it's not their favorite. So we try to meet each child where they're at, and there are other ways to learn than simply reading.
As you can tell, reading is a large part of our scholastics because to us, the ability to self-educate is very, very important. Once you have the ability to self-educate and a desire to learn, nothing can stop you at that point. You're going to find the information, you're going to dig, and you're going to figure out what you need to know when you need to know it. You're not as dependent on other sources to tell you what you need to know. You will figure it out for yourself.
So we do use a lot of teaching the children how to learn. what questions to ask, how to find the answers to their questions using the library, the internet, books, all of these things, humans as resources, asking
Right.
questions of adults. So those are big parts of our
We try to teach
homeschooling.
critical thinking from a young age.
But we also deal with some specific struggles and challenges that not everyone deals with in their homeschooling journey, and that make our journey maybe more difficult in some ways than others. And specifically, that has to do with neurodiversity.
So, some specific neurodiverse symptoms, if you will, or things that we deal with are autism, as well as ADHD and OCD.
We deal a lot with dyslexia, and also we've been dealing with speech delays in our children. And so all of these have different aspects to them and affect learning and homeschooling in a different way. And with all of the neurodiversity, homeschooling has been extremely beneficial because it allows us to take time when time is needed, to reset schedules, and to help our children to learn how to better function and flow with their brain and the way it was designed. Regarding dyslexia, I had dyslexia as a child, very, very strongly. I still have slight dyslexia, but I didn't realize that until I was an adult, that that was the source of all of my struggles in spelling, and what there's some little ticks that my brain does that I didn't understand that was related to dyslexia. So I have been able to use that understanding and my struggles to help my children that struggle with the same issue. Not all of them do, but some of them very strongly, more than others. And it is pretty amazing when you read a child's work that is written completely backwards and upside down
Yeah,
from bottom to top. Like it
it's
is,
crazy they can do that, but that's how their
but
brain sees
they
it.
see it and they can read it and very clearly. So it is quite amazing what these brains do. And so it's not trying to change the brain as much as help them to understand
How
how other people see it
and how to be understood by
and
others.
how they can better change it so that other people can understand what they're trying to say. And kind of approaching it more of that way. Like, this is the correct English way to do it, but I understand this is the way your brain does it. And if, we let them do it both ways because as long as they know they're learning the right from their dyslexia, their own brain way, I don't have a problem. I'm not going to force their brain to never work the way it was designed.
It's important to me that they learn what is standard today in our daily world so they can operate in life and be communicating with others. However, we don't want them to ever come away with the thought that the way their brain thinks is wrong or bad. There's a reason why they think that way, and it can be a good thing if they know how to use it.
So another thing we've mentioned is that we've dealt with a lot of speech delays, and part of this comes from the fact that um, I have MTHFR, and we suspect Keegan may, but our children have all been born with severe tongue and lip ties, and that has required revision from the point of birth. And in two of our children, that caused severe speech delays. And with a speech delay, I want to use this to kind of segue into the next section that I want to talk about is we did seek help. We sought, there are resources out there for homeschoolers, and you need to learn how to use them. So, with our children who had speech delays, we did find a speech therapist and we successfully corrected the speech delays. And we did that for, was it almost 2 years?
Yeah, it was two
We
years.
did speech therapy multiple times a week.
Yeah,
Like it went from multiple times a week down
to
to
every
once a
other
week,
week. Yeah,
and then down to
spaced
every
out.
other week. But um that was a journey. And while I knew a lot of the things, it was a good reminder and it also kept us on track with using those tools. And by the time we got that child speaking correctly and through their delays, we noticed that the younger sibling was following in the pattern of speech delays. And after talking with the therapist was like, yeah, you can, or you could just do it at home. You've gone through it. And I think it took us about a year working closely that most of the speech delays with that child have been corrected. So there are times to use these resources that are available. And even with my extensive knowledge and my mother's extensive knowledge, having an outside person who's set apart from the situation can be extremely helpful and a good guidance. Another resource is there are trained teachers out there, and we personally have found currently registered and retired teachers who help us monitor our children's learning progress and give us feedback on a regular basis. And we have the portfolio reviews that we do where we collect our children's work and we have them meet with the teacher and talk with the teacher and help us, because I have a lot of knowledge and I am confident in my skills. However, I also admit I am not a trained teacher and there are things that I sometimes miss. And so having a network of other teachers that are trained in that profession is really a benefit and a huge support for me.
And then on my end of the spectrum, I bring more of the autism, the ADHD, and the OCD into the mix genetically. So it's something I'm still working through myself, and we're trying to teach our children through it. So a physical therapy has been a big help in that aspect, particularly with the ADHD, in order to help focus. We don't believe in taking the pharmaceutical method. That's not the route we've chosen to go. So as a way to teach him to self-regulate and to be able to help himself in times where he needs to scholastically focus, how to get there. And physical therapy, dry brushing, things like that have really helped in that area, and taught them how to work with their body where they're at.
So we apply therapies as needed, whether it's physical therapies, speech therapies, and we take the recommendations of the teachers in our lives as well as our medical care providers, what they recommend, and we take them seriously. And we work as a team to try to give our children the best possible homeschooling experience. Just because you're homeschooling doesn't mean you have to do it alone. There are resources out there. And if your child is showing delays or showing signs of special needs, that then you need to take the time as a parent to address those needs and accept help. And it is a humbling experience. It is difficult as a parent to admit that your child may have a fault or a struggle area, but we need to humble ourselves and ask for help when we need it. And we have found that to be extremely beneficial and only grow our network of support and help us in our homeschooling journey.
So the big question people probably have are curriculum. What curriculum or curriculums do you use?
So we have a lot of experience with a lot of different curriculums. Or I should say, I have a lot of experience with a lot of different
I had
curriculums.
experience with Rebecca, and that's about where it stops.
And again, I had experience with Abeka. Early on, we used a lot of Abeka throughout up to first grade, and then sometimes there were some parts of Abeka throughout. But generally, up to first grade was mom's strong recommendation of using Abeka in her personal. Um, I also used Bob Jones for a period of time, especially in high school. That was helpful. We did a lot of Charlotte Mason studies, unit studies. We did Rod and Staff for a while, which I kind of liked the setup of that. Paces, I never cared for Paces that much. Easy peasy homeschooling, again, wasn't my favorite. Things we've tried ourselves. Um, a really big one was The Good and Beautiful. That wasn't around when I was a kid. So that was something when I found it, I was very drawn to the color and the layout. And it was something that I could use or Keegan could pick up and use. And this has always been our one goal with homeschooling is if it has to be something that Keegan can teach.
Right. So that if I need to take over for some reason, something happens, even for a short term, I should be able to pick up where she left off and help them continue in their day.
So being a sometimes birth worker, that would pull me out of the home.
Mm-hmm.
Keegan needs to be able to continue the children's education when that happens. or if I had a baby, he needs to be able to help keep the homeschool going. So that was always a goal. And the Good and Beautiful had a very easy layout, and we used that for um, a couple years. I'd say 2 to 3 years, from preschool up into first and second grade. We used more so that. But really, as we added more children, it becomes it's expensive for one thing, but also it became overwhelming for me. It never fit my teaching style. And that was a big hard part for me. We have used building your own curriculum. I tried that for a year or two because, I mean, I think about it now. Our oldest is almost 10. So I've been doing homeschooling. If you say when I started preschool when she was like 2.5, 3, actually sitting down and doing preschool, that means I've been
Seven,
doing
eight
school for
years.
7, 8 years now, which is crazy. I don't see it as being that.
That's a fast.
But I did a year or so where I did just build my own curriculum from scratch. That is exhausting and a lot of work. Kudos to any mother who chooses to do that, or father. We did the Good and the Beautiful. Again, beautiful, lovely curriculum, lots of colors, very interactive, very expensive if you have more than 1 or 2 children doing school. We did try to get more out of it by just using the books and using a notebook so that we could reuse the books. So writing all of the work into a notebook. Again, that's a very time consuming and can cause confusion, and not how the curriculum was designed. So that was, there's give and takes to it.
Results may vary.
Then we did a hybrid of generic school supplements one year, where I would find the big books of learning that you can get online that for each grade. And we had the child go through that, the generic school supplement. And we also kept a notebook with interest-based, more unit study learning, and then had a math curriculum as a core. We did that for a year, and that wasn't working. And finally, I was at my wit's end, like at the school year, and I was crying and in tears, and I'm just like, I don't know what else to do. I am so overwhelmed. I don't feel like a good teacher. And someone mentioned to me that they had heard of a new curriculum that was specifically centered around ADHD and autistic children. And it's called Fun Schooling. And this has been like for the win with us. Fun Schooling has been great. Now, there still has to be some structure, and there still has to be some time spent with each child on the different subjects. But overall, in general, it is the easiest curriculum I have done so far with the children, and given the most freedom to them and to me as a parent, and really has started to bring back the joy of learning, I think, with each of our children.
And really, again, this curriculum is focused on educating autistic and ADHD individuals, children with those. And so since our children all exhibit those signs, that was our biggest hurdle, if you will, our biggest thing we were trying to find a way to educate and keep things fun with a autistic and ADHD individuals.
And so the basis of Fun Schooling is you have these journals, they're pre-printed books. So off the bat, yes, it is going to be an expense, but it is a structured expense which we feel is worth it, and it is cheaper than a lot of other courses. Basically, we've purchased a math book and a main journal for each child, and history for those that are at that age of doing history, and science for every child in that age group. So they go through the journal, they answer questions, they write down words, they read through books that are all associated with their interest. And that really has been the most beneficial and worthwhile curriculum that we have found to work with. So for us, Fun Schooling for the win. We love the Fun Schooling curriculum. It allows flexibility between the children's different interests, and when their interests shift throughout a school year, we're able to accommodate that. There's lots of break pages, coloring, um, incorporates using videos and library, and it's just a really concise curriculum, but really meets the needs of our children. Where we're at this phase in life, that is what we're finding to be extremely helpful for both our children and for our own sanity.
Now, an important point to us to make is that unschooling is not homeschooling.
Yes, now I talk about like free schooling, fun schooling, those terms, having a very life schooling, homeschooling mindset. But I do want to be very clear that this is different from unschooling, in my opinion, and
From
our
what we've
experience.
observed that unschooling is, we are not practicing unschooling.
Unschooling has no real structure, no curriculum is used, and there is no standard of achievement. The child's ability is the achievement. Learning is considered to be spontaneous, and progress is self directed by the child. Unschooling has the basic mindset of forced learning destroys a child's curiosity, and that we trust the child. If we don't, that's our problem, not the child's problem. And for us, that's not how we do it.
The reason why we are opposed to unschooling and do not see that as a form of homeschooling is because it's unbiblically not child training. Scripture is very clear that you should train up a child in the way they should go. They need outside direction. A child cannot thrive when left to themselves.
Now, that being said, homeschooling can take many different forms. As we talked earlier, there's schooling at home versus homeschooling. But homeschooling as a whole, compared to unschooling, which has no set structure, no curriculum, homeschooling generally ensures that the core subjects, math, science, reading, and history, are being covered. Now, homeschooling can be more structured, as Keegan's was growing up. It could be more relaxed, like mine was more relaxed than his. But I even know parents who take it a step further and are even more relaxed than our version of homeschooling. And that's okay. With homeschooling, there is structure and discipline, and the belief is that some structure and some discipline prepares the child to meet the society's demands. And that is our goal, is to have children who can function in a healthy way in society and that know that life is not all about them. And so we do believe in having some sort of set structure at times. However, what I do want to be clear is there are some similarities between homeschooling and unschooling, especially if you have a less structured homeschooling environment. A lot of people may assume you unschool. Both homeschooling and unschooling can be child led. Homeschooling doesn't have to be child focused or child led, but it can be. So that is a similarity that they share. But to us, the two are very different, and we do want to make a distinction so that people understand where our perspective is coming from.
I think a application of this difference between unschooling and homeschooling would be an unschooler would say, "What are you interested in learning today, child?" And if they want to learn how to play basketball, then that's what they spend the day doing. Okay. Where homeschooling, from my perspective, would take it a step further. That's what you're interested in, so let's sign you up for basketball classes. We'll bring you to the library so you can study something about basketball. We'll get you a basketball or help you earn money to buy your first basketball. Make it a thing they invest in and that they can't just depart from. That we'll set the set time. You'll stick with it for this long, whatever it is, to really try it out, not just spend one day doing it and then next day moving on to something different.
We may take day to day the basic interest. So if even if it's not like I want to full on commit to basketball, but I'm really interested in basketball today. Okay. Well, instead of just watching a bunch of videos about it or just doing whatever they want throughout the day, we might say, okay, your topic of interest is basketball, so let's use basketball in our math. Let's find out some of the history. Let's incorporate all of the different subjects around that topic. That would be homeschooling, whereas unschooling just would let the child explore and play. And
From what we've observed, seen and read and heard.
so that is our perspective. And again, we can be wrong in that. And you could be an unschooler and do things differently. And I'm not saying that unschooling children does not have some benefit or some positive benefits in society, or their children are going to be ruined by unschooling. However, in our state, there are legal requirements, and homeschooling is legally allowed. Um, Unschooling is a very much a gray area. And according to state requirements regarding homeschool, if you are unschooling,
How
I'm
would
not
you
sure how
prove
you
you're meeting
legally
those
work through
requirements?
that. So,
Right.
again, state to state, do as you will and as you are convicted for your children. So, overall, in a summary, what do we do for homeschooling? Well, I could call it gentle homeschooling. That is what we would consider our homeschooling method. We choose what works for each child, and we incorporate each child's own special needs and their special interests into their daily structure and curriculum. We appreciate child led interests, but we also do have some structure and ensure that we are meeting all the state requirements as they come up. We also are working and finding ways to make teaching less stressful for me, and working with our children where they're at and accepting and embracing their different difficulties, talents, and struggles.
So, homeschooling, particularly with multiple ages, what does that look like? How do we do it?
So, this is just how we do it and what works for us and our family. But we tend to do table centered learning and a one room schoolhouse style classes. However, it can flow and change as needed. Some children will need to go to specific workplaces to be able to focus, and we have those set up for areas where they can do that. We also address each child's unique needs. One child in particular is extremely hypersensitive to sound, and we have found for that child a pair of headphones to muffle the noise and mute really helps for focus and decreases the stimulation enough that they are able to better interact with the class and interact with the family as a whole. One child really needs music to focus and hyper focus in on their school and pay attention. And so for that child, it is often putting a CD or playing some music in their spot where they can listen while they're doing their school. We do have special study stations for those who need to separate and focus. We also incorporate at times, one child has a hard time sitting still. So I have a bouncy ball, like an exercise ball, that child can sit on and gently bounce while they're listening to classroom reading time, or whether they are working on a project and they just have extra energy at the moment. That is an option we have for that child. So we really try to address each child's unique needs as they're learning.
So, I would say an average school day would start at the table altogether, but then once they kind of get their assignments or they get an idea of what they're doing, they kind of break off into their own study groups,
For
their
the
own.
older children,
Right.
yes. And then the younger ones tend to stay and have more hands on learning, especially those who do not yet read, need to have that structure. The Basically, I've found preschool, kindergarten, first grade really needs a lot of hands on time. And so those will have more hands on one teaching throughout the school year. Once they start getting to second, third grade level, they are starting to branch off and do their own things and come in for frequent checks. But those age groups started going to their study spots more. And then our fourth grader and is fairly independent at this point, but does come in for regular checks as well to check where the progress is at, to check in if they have any questions. And so that's kind of our structure. And so every year, that's how I kind of foresee the older grades would be more and more gaining independence in that. However, always coming in for centering, teaching, and check-ins.
Which again, that independence, that's a key factor to us, that the object of schooling is to teach them self-sufficiency and the ability to find the answer to the questions that they have. Teaching them where those resources are, or to how to use resources, how to find things. Because ultimately, it's my belief and my goal that the overarching theme of education is teaching them to be a critical thinker and a self-sufficient knowledge gainer.
Now, this structure, when you do have multiple children, um, to me, it's important to have some semblance of structure, and it gives opportunities to teach patience because children will have to wait. And so I always, for every child, have extra busy book or a secondary project coloring or cutting activity book that they use for what we call waiting time. So, for instance, if I am in the middle of a lesson with the youngest children and an older child has a question, if that's a question that I can answer very quickly, I will try to interrupt the lesson to do so. However, if I know that I'm in a very focused session and I cannot be interrupted, I will give them a signal and they know that they are to go and do a busy book or one of their coloring books or cutting projects. They're to move on and come back to me with their question when they're ready. For the same being flipped, if I'm in the middle of working through something with an older child and someone else needs help, they can stand and wait patiently, but they also know if it's taking too long to answer their question, they are welcome to go and get to their busy activities, and I will come and find them and answer their question when I am done with the child I'm working on. So it really does teach patience when you have one teacher teaching multiple age groups at a time. A strategy for little ones that I used early on, ever since our oldest was a child, was we used a few different techniques. One is a blanket on the floor or using a high chair to put the child in. And so when I am doing an activity with the older children, the younger child is still there. They're either playing on the floor, on the blanket, or they're playing in their high chair next to the table where I'm sitting. We spend a lot of time doing the ABCs, coloring, one, two, threes, the preschool basics. And again, we mentioned we start that very, very early. So the busy basket for toddlers and infants will have usually a busy book of some sort, like a felt book that they can use. It may have manual puzzles, color matching, little fidget things like that they can play with, a soft doll. I try to keep quieter toys there, but they're going to make noise, and I think that's healthy for everyone to learn to deal with some level of noise while they're learning. And if I really need to do structured time when there is zero noise, that is when reserved for a nap time or quiet time. I also use a lot of what I call throwaway books that littles can do on their own. So, for instance, our two youngest are 3 and 1, or almost 18 months now. And those two do a lot of school on their own because they want to be like the big kids. Now, I do reserve for the 3-year-old some books that are only done with mama's help. And those are the books that I really go through in the alphabet, the numbers, and I'm trying to really hone in on the skills in those books. However, by having the throwaway books or they're on their own books, that gives them the freedom. I don't care if those books are scribbled in front to back and they're not actually traced the letters properly. They're going to get thrown away. That's okay. But to that child, it's teaching again independence, and I am doing this on my own. And more, we're actually seeing where the 3-year-old is tracing properly and coloring in the lines because he wants his work to look like the big kid's work. And so he is more and more honing it himself in his own do it himself books. So that is a technique we've started early on, just getting very cheap dollar store books or finding books at yard sales, giveaways, just printing off pages and stapling them into a book for them to do that will reinforce the basics but give them the freedom that they desire. So, another part of homeschooling multiple children, and I would say one of the biggest and most important parts, is making sure there's time to address each child's needs and issues in private, especially with some of the older children where there are specific struggles. I remember what it was like to be in a big family, and I also recall times where I was embarrassed because of my lack of progress, and not that my parents were intentionally embarrassing me, but they would talk about a certain error or failing, and I remember how that felt. It embarrassed me. And so something we strive to do, and we're not perfect at, is to, when we find issues or have to correct a child's school, not doing it publicly if it doesn't need to be public, and trying to take them in private and show them, here, this is where, this is an error. Maybe we should do it this way. And also just making sure each child has time to come and have one-on-one teaching time, answer any questions they have, or just do a one-on-one check-in and see their progress for the day. And that has been important to us and shown a lot of good results, I think, with our homeschooling teaching.
Another big part of teaching so many children at different age levels is honing in on special interests. A big part of neurodiversity individuals is they will always have at least one special interest, some subject or a thing that they're very focused on and that they really, really want to learn over a longer period of time. They don't just jump intensely from one thing to another. We will do that, but we usually have one thing that we lock onto and we don't depart from. So that's been a big deal for us, finding what that thing is for each of our children, and then trying to fuel that to give them the information, the access they need to continue that pursuit of knowledge and learning in that subject.
And we do this through the free schooling is great for this, or fun schooling. The fun schooling curriculum is very good at incorporating special interests. We use it through the use of library books, online resources, and things of that nature. So we do highly incorporate each child's interests. We have one child who tends to bounce around interests a whole lot more than others. And again, we just embrace it and incorporate it in because we accept that that is part of the neurodiverse family that we have.
Yep.
Yeah, them as an individual.
Those desires, that way of thinking is not going to go away. That's just the way they are. That will be with them their whole life. So our goal is to make that a healthy function of their life, to teach them how to harness that and to use it to better themselves and others around them, rather than see it as a negative.
And I do want to add a caveat here. Like, I understand our family is different than a lot of families. I do have a background in a large family setting. Both of us have a homeschooling background. But just because you don't have that doesn't mean you can't homeschool. And there are a lot of resources out there that can help you at any phase of homeschooling learning that you're at. If you're just researching it, if you're already in and you feel like you're sinking, or if you're an old pro, there are so many different ways to homeschool your child. And I don't want anyone to walk away from this thinking their way is the only way. The curriculum they use must be the curriculum for me. Just be open and trying anything and find what works for you and your children.
There's no one method that fits all. There's no golden bullet. There's no, this is the only way, this is the best way. It's going to depend on you, your family, your children, your needs.
And it's going to shift and fluctuate, I would argue, throughout, because it really can be different for different phases and seasons of your life. And the guilt is real if you spend expensive curriculum and you spend money and invest in something and then it totally doesn't work for you. You can't always recoup that cost. And like, we had that happen where I had bought some very expensive curriculum. It totally didn't work for us. It did not live up to the promises. I ended up donating it to a local homeschool group that was going to share it or add it to their library. But you know what? You're going to make mistakes because that is part of life. Just try, because it is worth trying. I do want to share a few favorite resources of ours for the preschool age and older children, especially those who are auditory and visual learners. One of my favorite resources is Preschool Prep Co. They do a lot of good videos for the alphabet, numbers, colors, phonics, sight words. I think we have some of their math facts DVDs. And these DVDs, we don't use all of the curriculum that comes with it, but the DVDs are very helpful to give the children a visual and auditory educational experience in a DVD format lesson, and they're very helpful. Our children absolutely love them. Watch them as often as we let them.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about it. For the really younger children, we don't do much screen time, and so when they have that screen time, it's with these educational videos. So they love these things because to them, it's like remember if you went to school in the '90s or maybe in the '80s, and they brought the TV in the classroom, like whoa, everyone got to watch a film. That's kind of the same idea that they don't watch a film often. So when they do, it's an awesome thing. It's just a big treat, but it's still educational.
So, Preschool Prep is a wonderful company that you should check out. Heidi Songs is another, especially this is if you have a child who, again, visual, I believe it's called kinetic learners, the ones who love movement. Heidi Songs teaches a lot of spelling and just educational concepts through music and dance. And so that has been extremely helpful for our kids.
Especially those with ADHD, they need to be actively moving to truly function mentally and think.
And as we mentioned earlier, the Thinking Tree Fun Schooling has been a game changer in our homeschooling experience the past year. We really like that, and I think we're going to be sticking with that curriculum in the coming year and tweaking it a little bit, but mainly sticking with that and continue working with it.
So here's the big thing: you can do it.
Yes, you can. Do not overthink it. Don't stress yourself out. If you're already coming from a place of stress, hopefully this is an encouragement to you that there are so many different ways your child is learning and you can do it. And there are resources and help out there.
Yes, it will be an investment, but it is worth it.
Yes, it is going to cost. You can invest just time and create everything from scratch. If I've tried that. I think one year I did a school budget of less than $50 for the entire school year. It was doable. I almost lost my freaking mind. But it is doable. But I made the trade of the investment of time. Yes. And all of the time that I put in and the mental bandwidth to do that. So
whether you're investing time,
you're either
or money,
investing time or a little bit more money. It is an investment, but it is 100% worth in taking the time and investing into your child and sacrificing in other areas. The sacrifice, the struggle, that is worth it. It truly is worth knowing what your child is learning and helping them and teaching them to love learning. Really is our goal and our focus. Teaching our child how to learn and how to love learning.
And reminder, you can teach. You might be thinking to yourself, I'm not a teacher. I didn't go to school to learn this. I can't teach my child. I'm not qualified.
But you are teaching your child every day, whether you think you're a teacher or not. From the moment your child's born, we're teaching our children. We're teaching them to communicate, to live. We are teaching them through our patterns and our lifestyles, our behaviors, our words. Everything is a way that we are teaching our children. Now, we may have to learn how to have patience, and you can. It is hard. I'm not a patient person, but I have been learning to grow and have patience. My husband laughs because he thinks I'm patient. I feel like I'm very not patient.
She's a very patient individual. She just sees herself getting frustrated, but she's really good at holding it together.
You can learn to communicate with your children. It may take time for you to learn how to communicate on a child's level in a way that your unique child understands. I have had concepts that I can teach to several of my children and everybody gets it, and then the next one in line doesn't get it. And so I have to learn how to communicate with that child and change how I'm saying what I'm saying until they get the concept. But you can do that. And homeschooling gives you the ability to take the time to invest that into your children. And you can do it, but you have to take it just one day at a time. You don't run a race all at once. It's one day, one moment at a time. Just remember, you can do it.
So remember that you can teach. You don't have to be a qualified teacher. If that's what it takes for you to feel ready, then get that done. But if you're not going to be able to do that and you still want to teach your child, you're already teaching them. You can teach. You can learn to have patience. You can communicate with your child, and you can take it one day at a time.
Well, it's about time to wrap this one up. It was a long one.
Yep, so please like, share, subscribe, and join our email list.
And don't forget, go out,
dream big,
and discover your own Yurtiful life.